Well, hi everybody. What is going on? Yes, a little bit later than was initially intended. Actually, have my younger brother in town from Georgia, and yeah, dinner, like family dinner, little thing went a little bit later than initially intended, and hoping the audio is okay. And I will give everyone a few minutes to kind of filter in, so on and so forth, yada yada yada. But let me just get the volume down, tune into the comments and the chatting and such. But yeah, my middle broski, my bestie, that he is on a little bit of a recruiting mission. He's a soccer coach, and so yeah, he's out from Rome, Georgia. Hopefully, audio is good. Hey, Ray Kelly, what is up? Who else do we have? Malito, I know it's super late, man. You made it. I saw you were trying to message me when I was at the family dinner and stuff. So I'm glad, as late as it is out in Italia, that you're tuning in, Mon Frere. Okay, so yes, Pacific, yeah, but that is still 8 o'clock here, my particular time, and 10 o'clock Eastern time. So for those on a Saturday that are tuning in, ideally, as we go forward here in what is beginning the 4th year of Hail to Stephen King. Crazy to think about, man. 4th year of Hail to Stephen King. And I actually need to where did I put my notes? I have notes around here somewhere. Since we haven't started things officially. 20 seconds. Huzzah. Yes, the one thing I was positive I had in here. But I guess that'll give everybody kind of a chance to filter on, ski through. Who else do we got? Nicholas Adam here. What's up to the fellow Ka-Tet? Yes, so glad to have you tuning in. And I'm digging that handle with the 19 and everything. Nap09. Dope. Okay, skip trial. Nah, we don't need that. Man, despite the lighting, it still looks like relatively dark. I don't know. Kind of, it is what it is in that regard. So, okay, I prefer suffering from sleep deprivation than missing a Hail Live. Yeah, we only do these Hail Lives, once a month and everything. So, excited to share some palaver about the Talisman. Yeah, this is a very interesting one, coming out 35 years ago in November. And we had some voting, and it was like, there was a lot of big anniversaries this particular November. We had Under the Dome, we had Thinner, we had the Talisman, and we had Revival. We all know Revival was what ended up being the November book of the month and stuff. But I just wanted to, give a chance for some of that love, so to speak, for this particular book, especially as much as I love it. But it had been a number of years since I'd read it. I actually had not reread this since starting my journey, just doing everything in published order. And I do have some different feelings about this book, not in a negative way, but just in a means of perspective with regard to, that journey along the path of the beam, and for like tower junkies like myself and stuff like that. Because whereas this one, I feel like laid the groundwork in a lot of ways for certain Dark Tower ideas. Black House, the sequel that came out a number of years later, kind of refined and directly connected, as opposed to just sharing similar DNA. But yeah, since it's been a few minutes at this particular point, I am just going to just get it started proper. So, all right, here we go, everybody. Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers, along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego, and if it please you, join me here for a bit of live palaver on Hail to Stephen King. That's right. The Tower of Tomes that you see there behind me signifies my love, my adoration for Sai King that has been going for a number of years at this particular point. This being the first episode out of the year of 19. So yeah, the year of 19 is officially done, which is, kind of a bummer and stuff. But, a new decade for Stephen King. He already has a book that's coming out in May, If It Bleeds. It's going to be a collection of 4 different novellas, and I'm very excited for that. As far as the on-screen stuff goes, with the exception of The Outsider, there's a lot of projects in progress, but not a lot of stuff that is dated, with the exception of that particular HBO show. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm just excited to be here with all of the Tower Junkies, the fellow constant readers, and so on and so forth. But yes, in November of 1984, we celebrated the release of this book right here. That's right. The Talisman. Bada blam. I've got my original hardcover. It's funny. I was taking another peek at this, and this was apparently a preview first edition. It's got all these stamps in it of like not for resale, preview copy, so on and so forth. Unfortunately, the dust jacket is like starting to like fall apart a little bit because it's I found this at Goodwill, for God's sake, But yes, this is one that I would probably declare is in my like top 10, top 15 stuff that Sai King has ever done. It's very Mark Twain inspired. It's so much that there's Twain quotes at the very beginning of the book. I mean, Preps was his collaboration with none other than Peter Straub, who was I guess born in Milwaukee, but he made a relocation across the pond to England, and him and King bonded, especially as Joe Hill talked about very significantly recently, actually, when I saw Joe Hill back in October on his book tour. When King moved his family across the pond in the early 80s, Kim and Straub really became super close at that particular point. And between sharing cases of beer and who knows, maybe a little blowski from some of the things that are referenced in this book, and also the affinity that we know King was starting to have with that particular stuff as the 80s progressed and his success got a little bit bigger. But yeah, they started discussing this idea of a collaboration. King was obviously riding high in the early 80s. By the time this came out in 1984, in 83, the previous year alone, King had just put out Christine and Pet Sematary. He had like 3 different, also Cycle of the Werewolf, if I'm not mistaken. So he had, I think, 3 different movies in theaters that particular year, if I remember. And then he also had 3 different books come out. And, Straub was seeing his first like mainstream success following Ghost Story, which was released in 79, was made into a Fred Astaire movie in like 81, 82, something like that. Loosely based, not anywhere near as good. And for Straub, besides this, Ghost Story and Coco are the 2 that a lot of people constantly point out to me as being some of his best work. I know Straub has won Bram Stoker Awards, particularly for this series of novels. I think it was 2 novels that he put out in 2003 and 2004. He won dueling Stoker Awards for those and stuff. So, Straub has continued his he's not as prolific as Stephen King, obviously, but they're good friends. They did the sequel, Black House, that everybody knows is very directly connected to the Tower in comparison with the loose connections, which we have here. And as I said in like the pre-roll-ish of this being the review proper, the Talisman, upon this reread, it became so apparent to me that this laid down so much just thematic groundwork for what King was going to explore later in the Dark Tower series. Because when this came out in 84, like, we didn't even have drawing of the 3 yet. King had really only put out those couple different separate sections that were collected in The Gunslinger in book 1. And to be frank, there's some stuff he had to retcon that is big ideas in this book. And as I was rereading, I forgot just, honestly, since it's been a number of years, and since I hadn't reread this since reading the entirety of the Tower series through a couple times at this particular point, whereas I've revisited all the Tower books, I had not revisited this book since reading it like 5 or 6 years ago. And the Talisman is apparently the apex, the nexus of all universes, of all of these different intertwining things. And as we know, as we get later on in just the Kingverse, as we're going to call it, that's not the case. That's what the Dark Tower is. So this is really where, like, as I was going through this, and this is going to be a spoilery review, everybody. I'm going to be just jumping around talking about all the aspects of this. It's funny because this book is listed, and I'm assuming that's a paperback count, because on the Wikipedia it says it's like over 900 pages. No, this is like 640, I want to say. Something like that. 644. Somewhere in that area. So no, it's it's not like it sized. It's not under the dome in scope and scale or anything like that, but it's still a very big epic book that I wonder more so than anything where all of these ideas came from, and like who do you give proper credit to, as far as Straub or King, because of the fact that it just makes me wonder, did those ideas of this talisman being, just the connective tissue, this like little linchpin of sorts, for every, universe, as it's called at one particular point. What is it? The daydreams, the territories of territories. Like this book very much, it deals primarily with like another world that is kind of like a twinner or a parallel of our own, but yet it does explore the ideas of there being just infinite alternate universes and stuff like that. And so was this just, I don't know, was this the spark? Did that spark come from Straub? Was that King's idea? I don't know. These are some of the questions that I'm really curious about. But I mean, Jack Sawyer is one of my favorite Stephen King characters ever. I love not only coming of age stories, but I love children's adventure stories because they remind me of my own childhood, of the fact that I wanted to be Short Round in Indiana Jones. I wanted to be, some of the kids in the Monster Squad. I wanted to, go on my own crazy Goonies like adventure. I really, truly did. And so reading stuff like this with this 12-year-old who, I mean, once again, the Mark Twain influences are heavy, even beyond the stuff at the very beginning. I mean, just Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn are two fantastic books. And unfortunately, this has some of the similar racy type things as far as, the uses of colorful language with regards to a African-American. But I just want to definitely preface this real quick with just how King starts the book. And he starts it with two different Mark Twain quotes, and they're both from Huckleberry Finn, actually. So starts out with, well, when Tom and me got to the edge of the hilltop, we looked away down into the village and could see 3 or 4 lights twinkling. Where there was sick folks, maybe, and scars over us sparkling ever so fine, and down by the village in the river, a whole mile broad, and awful still and grand. And then we get another one, which is very simple, just a single sentence. My new clothes was all greased up in clay. I was dog tired. Yeah, maybe not as prolific as some of the stuff that King has done previously, but this very much draws inspiration, both Straub and King from there. And it is an epic book. Epic, as I used earlier. But epic does occasionally entail being a little bit bloated. And I must admit, upon this reread, as much as I still adore various story beats here, and a lot of this book, it doesn't feel long. And this book definitely feels a little bit long in the tooth, I gotta say. But that doesn't mean that I have any, like major gripes and stuff like that. And the back half of the book is where it really, really gets going. But when we have two separate, like almost captivities for our protagonist, one at this bar where, he's being like held captive and forced to work, and, at the Oatley Tap and everything. And then when he's also at Sunlight Home and stuff with Wolf, it's, it just, I don't know. I'm very curious if Amblin Entertainment, which is Spielberg's company, ends up getting the chance to adapt this, like how much would be trimmed in certain sectors and stuff like that. But I mean, the back half of the book moves, but the middle, it definitely just, it feels a little bit slow. So in any event, before I just dive into like major impressions and stuff like that, I'm going to jump back to the chat and just see Massive Entertainment. Malito says, yep, I already mentioned that he prefers the suffering, because I know it is very late on his end of the world. Is that a sketch of Mr. King behind you? That definitely is. I actually obtained that Massive Entertainment at Dallas Frightmare when we were covering that as press this past May. And it's been a permanent spot of the set ever since. However, for the 200th episode, which is coming very soon here, just a couple episodes away, as a matter of fact, I am going to be doing another set redesign. I may actually be moving into a different room of the Fuego studios here in Arizona. Not 100%, but look forward to just kind of a little redesign. I did a redesign for the 100th episode, And boy, the 100th episode was only like a little over a year ago at this point, not about a year and a half ago. It was September of 2018. But yeah, this is the 4th year now that I've just started of this program. I mean, I did the like kind of soft pilot, so to speak, for King's birthday back in September of like 2015. It's just nuts to think that much time has transpired, and I'm so stoked that all of you are still along on this ride with me because it's a blast. Looks a little dark, but creates great atmosphere. Okay, Malito says, and this year is going to be the 10th anniversary for Full Dark No Stars. Love that book, as do I. I'm shy. I'm late. Miking the Monic, Mr. Trauma Trash. What is up, good sir? I am so stoked to see you making a brief appearance, man, because I know it's very late over on your end of the world as well. So I extend my sincerest thanks. Okay, who else is on? Happy 2020, everybody. Yeah, it's kind of bittersweet to see the end of the year of 19, but a new year of all kinds of excitement going on here on the horror show. So stoked for that. Sharon Breveridge, happy to have made it. Long days and pleasant nights, Ka-Tet. Ray Kelly says, does Lacey's Story not have a date yet for Apple TV? No, unfortunately, it does not. I don't even know if they're filming it just yet. They're still announcing, lots of the casting and stuff like that. I'm stoked about the Julianne Moore. I'm stoked about the Clive Owen, Dane DeHaan. I mean, they're putting together a kick-ass cast for that, and I just can't wait, man. Sam Butterfield, another member of the Hail Ka-Tet. Happy New Year, Fuego. Feliz Año Nuevo to you as well, Sam. Thanks for dropping through, dude. Daniel Corey, who I believe is also on the other side of the pond, if I'm not mistaken. Been a while since I caught one of these live Hail episodes. The Talisman is a killer book, though I like Black House more. Yeah, that's the thing. There's I actually talked to a lot of people who prefer Black House. I mean, it's not the majority, but it's almost like one of those situations similar to, me, who prefers Dr. Sleep as opposed to The Shining, and everybody says, oh, it's blasphemy, so on and so forth. But there's quite the contingent of people who prefer Black House and just that hard criminess that King really just got so, I don't know, he got really hard up on the detective stories in his later years. And I mean, so much stuff from the Mr. Mercedes trilogy to, the Colorado Kid, The Outsider being another one, I mean, yeah, it's something that he's been enamored with for a hot minute now. And I'm assuming if it bleeds, it's gonna be a similar situation. Howdy and good evening, folks. My dude, Robert Duell, who has become an official member of the horror show. He's also out here in Arizona. And since the departure of our dude, Dirk, he's been, Luis is not able to come out as often, unfortunately. His work schedule is a little bit weird. He actually has the same day job spot at this particular hotel as I do. And yeah, he's not able to come out as often, but Robert has he has a flexible enough schedule to come and just, offer his insights. And Robert, you have been an amazing addition to the show, man. And I love the fact that you're also a CR, Tower Junkie, all that rad status. And I know Robert also read this particular book. I think this was Robert's first time reading The Talisman, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, it's going to be some fun discussion. Okay. Once again, back to I believe it's Nicholas Adam. Yes, that's right. Nap 19. I love how they used Twain as inspiration for this and sort of used Poe for Black House. There is a Poe reference in this actually too. Later in the book, there's a reference to the Raven, as a matter of fact, which is kind of interesting. That really sort of hits on how different both stories are, but the same. Yes, it's that aspect of duality. And obviously with dimensional jumping and with twinners and all of this different stuff that is explored in this book. Good observation, Nick. That makes total sense, man. And I appreciate the insight right there. All right. Daniel Corey says the section in Sunlight Gardener Home for Boys and how that situation plays out is one of my all-time favorite things in any King book. Yeah, that's one that really deals specifically with manipulation and deals with, obviously the religious aspect and stuff like that, with Gardner and just the way he's kind of just, I don't know, it's almost like cult status with the way some of these kids act. I mean, even though he's mistreating all of them and he's brainwashing all of them, the fact that so many of them go along with, and I mean, the stuff with Wolf in that, and where he gets all shot up and everything after he starts rampaging through the entire place. I mean, it's sad, man. It's one of like the biggest, most emotional beats, I think, in any particular King book. And yet I must contend that I felt like all the stuff there did, much like with the Oatly Tap, it felt a little long to me on this particular reread. It doesn't mean that I disliked it, but yeah, it was just, I don't know. Whereas once again, It and The Stand are these ginormous books that I don't feel like drag, and they keep and they captivate attention and everything. It's stuff like this and stuff like Under the Dome where I don't necessarily know if it maintains it as well. But the book is very sectioned. It's very, it has these different acts that are all very distinctive and stuff. And so I think that that's pretty badass. Okay, what else do we have? Malito says, I agree with you, Fuego. The book's a little bloated at times. I really like the 2 captivity parts and the part where Jack visits Richard at his college. Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of Richard Sloat in this book, and I mean, he's supposed to be this kind of snivelly counterpart to Jack, and the fact that he's in disbelief once he gets over to the territories, and he's like, nope, I'm in a dream, so on and so forth, and he's just not having it. As far as companions go, I just love Wolf so much, that when we switch in the second half of the book over to Richie, being his counterpart and stuff, I mean, I don't know. I mean, Jack is my boy. I mean, you're my boy, Jack. He's awesome. But as far as like, his tag teams go, as far as duos go in this book, I mean, I love Parkas and I love Wolf. Not as big on Richie personally, but that's just me. As I always contend on here, art is subjective, personal opinions, and I don't want everybody to agree, with me or, that with Cecil or anybody else on the channel. I appreciate the fact that we all have our own open minds and we just interpret things differently. I think that that's what makes everybody unique and really sweet. Sharon chimes in once more. She says the way he manages to rise above all of the harsh treatment in those places is awesome. Yeah, it's one of those against all odds sort of situations, and it's character building, and it's compelling in that regard. And yeah, it just shows, man. I mean, when we encounter our damaged Jack in Black House, it just really shows. I mean, it's an interesting spin on the character because of the fact that as a child to encounter so much adversity and persevere and rise above and everything else, like you just know how scarred he must be at that particular age, and how, yeah, all of those ordeals, even if you overcome them, they still will probably weigh heavily on you a little bit. And I mean, it all still compounds and piles up and everything. My dude, Truman Trash, chimes in once more. Looking forward to having Rob in front of the camera. Yes, you two bearded boys and your love of that. All right, sup. Listening as I work on a special Witcher-related episode. Man, Cecil, I am not, that's Cecil chiming in properly for the channel right there. Yeah, I still haven't started The Witcher. I was like reading comics and then, finishing reading this book, and then my little brother coming into town and stuff. So I have not yet started The Witcher, but I know that The Witcher was, it usurped and leapfrogged The Mandalorian as the most watched show of the year. I mean, the 3 shows that everybody has talked about so significantly, and they're not really all horror, obviously, but The Witcher, Mandalorian, and Watchmen are the 3 that everybody has just been going absolutely bonkers for. So, okay. Joshua Dodd, that's a name that I haven't seen on here. My daughter and I both read this at the exact same point of our lives. God, I love this book. This is definitely one of those books that just, it hits me in those nostalgic feels, because once again, as I contended earlier, and I saw my dude Blue from Cemetery Dance, man. Love those guys over there. Him and Chismar and the gang. Yeah, it's a book that just really makes you like, I love coming of age childhood stories and stuff like that. Like adventures with kids. It's just, I mean, Goonies, Monster Squad, stuff like that. And, King did it tremendously with it and with Stand By Me. And he did it in a very solid fashion with The Institute most recently, And so I just think King writes kids very competently and very believably, I mean, I don't know, he is still in touch with that essence of himself. And it just, there's nothing disingenuous about the way that he puts these sort of stories together, when it's, and it's honestly so much scarier when younger people are being faced with these just astounding circumstances and just frightening fates and things of that nature. I mean, it's just really, really cool. This is the one King book I've not been able to finish. That's interesting, Blue, because that's something that we were discussing a little while ago, was the fact that at over 600 pages and stuff like that, and in all of its various like iterations and, you know, just kind of, there's all these different segments that are like self-contained stories almost to a degree. And that's why I really felt this was going to be perfect for a comic book, because it could be all of these different like 4 to 6 issue series. And all that they did was the Road of Trials. You know, they were supposed to do the entire book as far as adaptation goes in comic form, and Marvel was not behind that particular one. I forget, it was a smaller imprint of some sort. But long story short, they do have kind of a prologue that actually goes into some stuff that is not in the actual book. King has given those liberties, you know, to Marvel specifically with fleshing out so much of the Dark Tower stuff. But even more so than that, I mean, it feels very comic book built in the way it's sectioned and segmented as far as just, you know, competent adaptation. And it's a bummer they didn't finish it. They did one mini-series, and it basically, I think it got us up to the Oatly tap, if I remember correctly, and nothing beyond that. So we didn't get to see, you know, him at the boys' home. We didn't get to see him, you know, getting into the wastelands or the blasted, whatever the heck they call them, blasted lands. Yeah. There is a lot of groundwork, though, for the Dark Tower that this put together. Let's see what else is being said. Massive Entertainment says, Big Dog, I got to go, but I love your vids, and you're a hell of an entertainer. And I know how you make any topic fun as hell. Got to finish sculpting. Have a great night and happy 2020. Massive Entertainment, thank you so much for coming through, mate. Greatly appreciated. Curtis is on. What is up, good sir? I haven't seen you on in a hot minute, man. Okay, Ben Grimm is here briefly too. He says Watchmen was great. Obviously, that's a little off topic. The Witcher looks fantastic. I've played the games, but I've not read the books. I know Mikey is really into the books, and he's just been geeking out. I've seen it on the various posts of his. 8 Witcher books are great. Okay, so this is Witcher stuff. It just never grabbed me, and I can't put my finger on why. I've read Black House twice, though. That's really interesting, Blue. And yeah, I guess, I mean, since that connects more directly to the tower, I can understand why that would be a little more highly prioritized. And really, those are 2 books that you don't necessarily have to read the Talisman to appreciate Black House. And really, unless you're like a deep tower junkie, you really don't have to read, Black House to get the full extent of the Talisman enjoyment, because those 2 books are drastically different, like in every possible way. I mean, especially since they were written like 20 years apart, so that's definitely something to keep into consideration. Nicholas says instead of a film, they should do a limited series and put each part of the book a couple episodes. That's a great suggestion. At this point, I am a firm believer, especially with King books, that they are better serviced on the premium networks. Put it on an HBO, put it on a Showtime. I mean, I guess an AMC or something, but I would still prefer the no constraints aspect that you get with premium cable, where you can just go totally at the material. You don't have to, defang and declaw it, sugarcoat it. That's why I'm so stoked about The Outsider. That is one of my most anticipated viewings of the upcoming year. Daniel says, does anyone else think Starlight Gardner is a way more compelling villain than Morgan Sloat? He should have been the big bad. Yeah, and the fact that, especially like when you see how tied in he is, I mean, with Sloat and all of his different minions and stuff like that, and the jumping back and forth aspect, there are certain things about this book that, while I do adore it, there's things that I don't like very much. I don't like the fact that when he jumps over, the attire changes and certain things change and whatnot. And there's also little elements of illogicality here and there where it's just like, okay, so initially he needs the hooch to jump back and forth, but then he eventually figures out how to do it without, but then he doesn't do it in like the most prominent and like expected situations. I don't know. There's certain inconsistencies in this book, especially as it develops. And another thing that I will say is that, very similar to the reason why I'm not as big on the drawing of the 3, and I know Blue loves drawing of the 3. So many of my fellow Tower Junkie friends love drawing of the 3. I'm not as big on that particular one because of the fact that I don't like as much when Roland is in our world. Not as big on that, and that is actually something that I will say I'm not as fond of with this book. I personally like the stuff where Jack is in the territories more. I mean, that's not to say there aren't compelling portions, but I prefer where he is, where it's fantastical. I prefer where he is in this other world. And I mean, where, like, especially as I've contended, where he's going through like the like barren lands and stuff like that that's been all nuked out and stuff, and it's like it's the Twinnerverse to where all of the nuclear testing was going on, in our world. Like, that stuff is dope. All the strange, like, mutated creatures, basically slow mutants to a degree, and like these big snake worm looking things that are eating like hairless dogs and all kinds of craziness. I mean, it's dope. Although it's a little bit too much where these kids are, sorry, I'm getting dead leg, where these kids are like just all of a sudden using Uzis, and like I don't know, man. I mean, they're 12 and it's fantasy, right? I mean, suspension of disbelief, as my father likes to say. My dad was a big fan of the 80s and 90s shoot 'em up movies, as I am as well, and there's a phrase that my father is a big fan of: check your brain in at the door. And yeah, I mean, when you're in this sort of situation with this kind of storytelling, I guess you just have to be accepting of that in that particular aspect. So okay, what else is being said? I have that comic. I think Robin first wrote it, right? I can't remember if Robin actually, was behind that one as well, or if she was just very similar to what is it, Peter David? I want to say how, she was doing the storyboards maybe, and then somebody else actually wrote it out, actually scripted it, and got the writer credit. I'm not 100%, but yeah, it sounds about right. I know I have that comic like somewhere around here, but I don't want to jump off camera again after already starting this up. So Joshua Dodd says, grateful to have caught this as my first, especially being my favorite book outside Yet Along the Tower. Yeah, this book is great, but it is a little long in the tooth, and epic doesn't necessarily mean completely captivating from start to finish, is what I will continue to contend. I'm still only 2 Dark Tower books in. I need to pick up the pace, says Mikey Mnemonic. And Blue says once more, that's a good point about Roland, but maybe deliberate. I don't think he could ever be comfortable in our world. Yeah, no, it's an accurate observation too. So all right, I'm going to jump into some notes at this particular point and set down the combat stuff. So this came out November 8th, 1984. And once again, it was the December book of the month because of the fact that everybody wanted to talk revival in November, myself included, for the anniversary of that. And I believe that was the 5-year. This is the 35-year, obviously. So it was apparently like there was a $500,000 budgeting campaign behind just advertising this, because both Straub and King were so big at the time. This being a collaboration between the two of them, like people were heralding it as possibly being what could be the greatest horror novel ever. It had so much hype behind it, and it ended up on the People magazine's worst of the year. There was like it sold a lot of copies. It topped the bestseller list for I think like 8 or 10 weeks, 12 weeks, something crazy like that. So I mean, there was a lot of people buying it, but it's not a King property that you hear a lot of casual fans mention, and I'm positive that's because of the fact that it's never been adapted. And since it's never been adapted, it's not as much in the public consciousness because of that. Even if a lot of people 35 years ago bought the book, maybe there's a lot of people like Blue, from CD, who are just like, I couldn't get into it, And it's, once again, it's a really great book, but it's not up there with like, Salem's Lot or It or Pet Sematary as far as, popularity goes, or The Stand, or, all the big King properties and stuff like that. But our traveling Jack Sawyer, and so his mother, Ms. Lily, and that's a name right there, Lily Kavanaugh Sawyer. She's the queen of the bees. She's the darling of the drive-in. So essentially, his mother was this like famous actress, but not famous as far as the mainstream goes. She was a beloved bit player, basically, and in the 50s and the 60s, she was in tons of these like schlocky, like genre type pictures and stuff like that. And at this particular point, she's older. Her husband is dead, unfortunately, died in a hunting accident, Jack's father. And she is presumably just whittling away from cancer. and she's drinking and smoking again because she doesn't care, and she wants to have nothing to do with her husband's business partner, this slime bag named Morgan Sloat. And so they have originally gone from LA to New York, and now they are in New Hampshire, basically hiding out at this hotel. And yeah, I mean, Jack is supposed to be in school. He's not in school. His mother is just, having a few martinis with dinner and sleeping late and just doing her own thing and whatever. And Jack is just wandering around, trying to amuse himself, trying to find things to do. And he goes to this amusement park just down the way. And this is where there's like major parallels, with Huck Finn and stuff, and Injun Joe and everything. And the fact that he befriends this older black dude named Speedy Parker, who tells him about this other dimension, this paralleling twinner, if you will, called the Territories. And he essentially reminds him of this ability that he's apparently known about for all of his life, because of the fact that his father has known about this place too when he was still around, as does his father's former business partner, who is now trying to basically screw over him and his mother. And it just kind of spirals from there, in the fact that, Jack is going to be jumping over to this particular, this dueling world that's got kind of a medieval type vibe to it. It is kind of like a world that's moved on, so to speak, very similar to the Tower. And I mean, with Black House, it's essentially confirmed that this is an all-world twinner kind of place, so to speak. And so this is another book that it doesn't directly tie in, but it shares a lot of cosmetic and ideological similarities, so to speak. And I mean, there's all of these amusing quotes that are very specific to almost like we have the high speech, in the Dark Tower series. In this, there's all of these constant references to the Book of Good Farming. So as opposed to referencing the Bible, there's the Book of Good Farming says yada yada yada. And as opposed to saying for Jesus' sake or something like that, they say for Jason's sake. And Jason is that. So there's this idea that in this alternate universe, so to speak, this parallel place, this Territories, that there are twinners of everybody who is on the opposite end in our world. In I'm trying the Earth, Keystone Earth. Yeah, if we're going to use Dark Tower terminology. And so essentially events parallel with you and your twinner, and it's very rare that, for instance, one will be wiped from existence, die or killed or whatever on one end, and it doesn't happen in at least a similar fashion on our end. And so where his mother is this this aging actress who's dying from cancer, her twinner in this Territories is this Queen, what is her name? Queen Laura de Losian? I don't know. Who knows how it's supposed to be properly pronounced? I should have probably listened a little bit more to the Audible for that sort of distinction. But yeah, so essentially, she's the Queen of the Bees, Jack's mother, Lily. This Laura on the other end is the queen of these Territories, and she is in this coma. And so he essentially goes on this journey to try to find this talisman that will presumably heal the both of them, And so he sets out from on the opposite end of the country in New Hampshire to go all the way to the other coast in California, back to his old home state. And that's where he's going to get to this paralleling hotel, this black hotel. And this is where it's so funny. It's going to the black hotel. We have the Dark Tower, black hotel, Dark Tower. It's in, dark structures, blackened structures and stuff. And so, yeah, there's some similarities here, obviously. But I mean, it's still very compelling, And he apparently remembers this ability after a little while to jump over to this other place because his father did it frequently. His father showed his business partner about this other place, and that's where their fortunes turned around, and they actually started doing great things and becoming successful. When they move out to LA, and they're trying to be agents and represent talent and stuff like that. And it wasn't until Jack's father shows, Morgan the territories and all of that, that we actually see their business, situation turn around. And then they're like a multi-million-dollar company. And this is in the early 80s, mind you. So, I mean, we're talking serious business. But yeah, Parker, Speedy Parker, this black dude from the amusement park, reminds Jack of this ability, and of this place. And he thought they were just these weird, like, silly, superficial daydreams that he had when he was really, really little. And he had apparently met Parker at one particular point when he was younger. And, Sloat, when his dad's business partner is shown this other world, the other worlds than these and so on, when he is shown these territories, he immediately starts thinking of how he can wheel and deal and how he can use people over there to not only just make him money, but even more so to gain power and prestige and all of these other things. And he had sent nefarious people from the territories to like go after Jack. And that's where there was his first meeting with Speedy, which is kind of interesting to make that parallel and kind of tie in and stuff like that. And so, I mean, he decides, okay, I'm going to go on this journey. I'm going to try to find this thing at, Speedy's behest after his reminding of this place and this power and everything. And it's interesting how when Jack is over in the territories, he realizes that not only does he traverse distance quicker, but like time passes a little bit differently and stuff. And it's, once again, stuff that is expanded upon in the Dark Tower series, is the fact that time in these other dimensions moves at a different rate, than it does here on Keystone Earth in our world and stuff. And so, I mean, once again, so much groundwork laid in this particular book for stuff that we would get big time in the Dark Tower series. And that's once again where I just wonder how much came from Steve and how much came from Pete. I'm really just kind of curious about it. But yeah, so he's flipping back and forth. And after a while, he does start to realize, okay, there's not just these two worlds. This world is like a daydream of a daydream. And then he's like, and then there's daydreams of daydreams of daydreams and so on and so forth. And, there's territories, there has to be territories of the territories. And that's where you really get into the major multiverseness that King would obviously explore so much more in the Dark Tower series. And it's fascinating in that regard. But there's a quote that I really appreciate. Little people have no business meddling in the affairs of the great. And I'm trying to remember if that was a Sloat quote. I mean, I reread this over the course of the last week or so, but that was one that I found interesting. And yeah, he's just essentially going on this journey from the Alhambra on one side of the country all the way over to this Agincourt Hotel. And just he's jumping back and forth between both worlds the entire time. And that's where he has those adventures of, okay, he jumps back at one particular point, and I think he's in Indiana, if I'm not mistaken. And well, actually, no, because he has the stuff where he's at this bar at one particular point, and he goes in looking for work, and then he's essentially this smoky guy is like holding him captive, and he's working as like this, this bar hop, so to speak. And yeah, it's a kind of a nasty situation of sorts, and yet it just makes me wonder why he waits so long to flip back over. It's kind of a weird situation. And I will say I do really like the Morgan Sloat interludes. So very similar to what we have in It a number of years later, is these interludes where it goes from telling the story from Jack's perspective and it jumps specifically to Sloat. And so we get the beginnings of his company with Jack's father. We get just attempts that he's made on Jack's life at various points. We get where he is starting to do his wheeling and dealing in the territories. I mean, it's pretty fascinating, I got to say. And, I saw somebody earlier saying that, the Reverend whatever dude at the boys' home, the Sunlight guy, is a little bit more compelling of a villain. And yes and no. I mean, I feel like him and Sloat, they're like kind of a villainous duo. It just really depends if you like the Jim Jones kind of just religious zealot, puppet master manipulator thing, so to speak. I mean, I don't know. Nasty, vile businessmen, pieces of shit who will just step on anybody to just gain fame and fortune and stuff like that. That's Sloat, obviously. So, I mean, it just depends on what you personally feel is just a more vile individual, I guess. And, growing up Reformed Baptist, I guess I would probably say somebody who is using religion in that sort of means is really just hideous and horrible to a degree. So yeah, maybe I don't know. I'm just not as big of the fan of that particular stuff in the Sunlight home. It's just, so after all the stuff that goes down, after he's working at that tap room and stuff, and then he jumps back over and he makes his way, and I'm trying to remember if I think he goes through like the weird living forest at one particular point, and I mean, anyway, he ends up back in our world, and he pulls this werewolf with him, and Wolf is one of, I love the character of Wolf here and now. Love it. And yet both of them, after he pulls after he flips with Wolf back to our world and he's in Indiana, they're trying to hitchhike, and there's no hitchhiking allowed except on the turnpike. And so they end up getting picked up and they get taken to this Sunlight home where all of this just awful indoctrination is going down. And yet turns out this person is an affiliate of Sloat's. So all of the interconnectivity, this is where I just kind of am like, I mean, yeah, Sloat's arms obviously reach very, very far in this regard, but it's still very compelling, especially like when we get to the finale of Wolf transforming and just slaughtering a bunch of these brainwashed kids and then getting all shot up. It is very, very, very sad. And I don't know. And about that point is where Jack ends up shortly after this, and he flips back, obviously, and then he flips back again, and he ends up reaching out and just getting reacquainted with Richard Sloat. So the son of his father's former business partner, who's also his best friend, he's away at this boarding school. It's like Thayer, I want to say, something like that. Anyway, but yeah, he's kind of in the area of the country, and he goes and seeks sanctuary with this friend of his, in turn pulls him back over as well. And that's where we have the second half of our journey, where things really pick up in my estimation, and they definitely become more horror in a lot of ways, where they're going through, the barren lands. And I do, as I mentioned earlier, like the geographical, just kind of, I guess, similarities, as Jack is, and like they get on this old, like, almost like push cart train kind of thing, then like the old things where you like push up and down to actually, get the damn thing to go on the railroad tracks. And so that's what is the name of the guy? It's not Fergus. It's Angus, I want to say. Anyway, not of particular importance, but yeah, God pounds his nails. That is for damn sure. But yeah, so this guy essentially, helps them. And they're going through this barren, blasted lands where there's all this radiation and stuff. And it eventually turns into a crazy shootout. And this, like, so we met our nice wolf before, but there's also some bad wolves, as they call them. And I don't like that band. Ugh, bad. And I loved God Forbid. That's off topic, though. But yeah, so the shootout at the Bad Wolves training ground, that's where I was mentioning a little bit earlier. And I'm just like, okay, 12-year-olds with Uzis and stuff. It's a little much, but honestly, if I was a kid, that would be a dream come true, going through crazy, adventures of that nature and getting into shootouts and all this wild shizzle. That would be just, I mean, could it get any more exciting? And yes, once again, there's flipping back, and then there's so much jumping back and forth. They're in the territories, they're in our, Americas and so on. And he eventually, obviously, gets out to California. And this is where, interestingly enough, after being in such just disbelief and denial and everything, Richard, his, Jack's best friend and the son of our main villain in this, starts to remember stuff that his father had privy him to informationally about just training grounds and, just, I don't know, in like Northern California, where they eventually end up, it's like there were lots of like training areas for wars that never happened and stuff like that. And that's kind of the way that Richard describes it. And Yeah, but they do in fact get to this black hotel where this talisman is hidden, and there's like a moat with all kinds of crazy creatures and stuff in it, which is pretty dope as they're like trying to row across and everything. And yet they inexplicably meet back up with Parkus, Speedy. He's somehow over in California at this particular point. Why he didn't go with Jack is a little strange. I mean, and yet he shows up at the end. I don't know. I'm not here to pick this book apart because I do really, really dig this book, but there are certain like head scratcher beats in this. And yeah, also that Sloat and his affinity for cocaine and the fact that King was such a blowhard at this particular time definitely amuses me. But yeah, I mean, once again, we get to this description of the talisman being the nexus, the axle of all possible worlds, And in the King verse, we are led to believe later on that that's actually the Dark Tower. So that's another thing where, I mean, Black House did have some retconning to do. Black House did have to like re-tinker some things, and I must admit I am a little bit underwhelmed by the final battle with him and Sloat, and I mean there's Sloat's twinner that is involved at a few particular points, and shooting of the lightning bolts and all this stuff. It's almost like some Emperor Palpatine stuff. I mean, I don't know. I don't like the end of this book as much, but hey, that is just me. I'm going to jump back to the comments now and see what all of you have said as I just railed off here for a little bit. So let's see where we're at. Okay, so let's scroll. Oh, Diane S is here. Awesome. Hi, Diane. What's going on? I graduated from high school the same year this came out. I feel so old. Not at all. Age is a state of mind, Diane. I constantly contend that. I am here. Sorry. How are you doing? Says Savannah. Fuego, how is Cecil doing? Mikey, how are you doing? Cecil's great. I mean, he's got a lot of work on his hands, with the being in pre-production now for Dylan's New Nightmare, and he's got all kinds of exciting stuff coming through the pipeline for you guys. That is my boy right there. That's my dude. Okay. So Nicholas chimes in once again and says, I am really hoping they do a third book. From what King and Straub have said about the story, it looks like they are using true crime elements again. Yeah, they have. They even say on the Wikipedia, they say there is a third book planned. And I mean, it takes them about 20 years. So yeah, 2024. That's probably when you'll get it. That's my guesstimation. But yeah, we don't have a King like release lined up beyond If It Bleeds here in a few months. And wouldn't that be exciting if the third part in the trilogy is his next announced release? That would be super dope. Okay. Blue says, Fuego, are there any parts that stand out to you as distinctively King or distinctively Straub? And Blue, this is where I don't know because I've never read Straub. I had a friend give me a copy of Coco like a year or so ago, and then I bought a copy of Ghost Story because a lot of friends of mine who have read Straub have said that Ghost Story is his best, and that's what really got him his mainstream success and stuff like that. I would admit the prose doesn't always feel King, and yet this is where I really wonder, was it a situation similar to with Owen where it was like, or with where he's collaborated with Joe as well, where it's like, okay, I would write a part and then I would send it over, and then the other my collaborator would rewrite it, or were there certain chapters that were exactly one author and certain chapters that were not another? In the midst of my research, I did not get much distinctiveness as far as like how collaborative it actually was. I mean, I feel like the pacing was not as King, and it was more so like the prose felt King, but some of the pacing didn't feel as King, and obviously a lot of the ideas did not feel like typical King. Writing about an actress, just. But then again, obviously, all the stuff with dimensional jumping and whatnot, as we got deeper into the saga of the tower and everything, that feels super King to me. So that's where I wish I had some adequate information about just the extent of how the collaborative process actually went down, because I would find that particularly fascinating. But no, it's not like there was like a particular chapter or sections or anything like that. Like the prose for the most part always felt King to me. It was the ideas and some of the framing of it all and how drawn out certain aspects were, then yes, I know King is notorious for drawing things out. But I mean, that's where I would be really, really curious, but can't say that I know for sure. We have 24 people on here. OMG, congratulations. Well, 25 is it's kind of paltry in comparison with some of the other streams that we've done. We can sometimes get double this, but hey, it's a Saturday night, man, and I know there's lots of other entertainment options. So I just want to say gracias for those who are actually just partaking in this palaver, so to speak. Mikey says, like you're saying, this book sounds like a cocaine binge in written form, and that's one of Mikey. That is definitely one of the things where I feel like it's excessive and not necessarily with like warrant for the narrative. And that's the thing. Like, it is massive, and yet there's nothing to me, even the interludes, that feel like they don't belong. And it's not that each little mini adventure for Jack doesn't belong, but I mean, I don't know. Maybe some could have been trimmed a little bit. That's just it feels very episodic, so to speak. And that's where, like, whereas King stuff all feels like it serves a purpose. I feel like there's like mini adventure after mini adventure after mini adventure, and that's definitely where the Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer vibe definitely comes in. And I mean, it almost feels like serialized storytelling. It's like when you read one of my favorite books of all time is Carlo Collodi's Pinocchio. I adore Pinocchio. But Pinocchio was originally published in a serialized format. That's why at the end of all of the chapters in that, it's like he's on like the dire verge of death and all of these different situations. And that's because it was serialized storytelling, and they wanted you to tune back in, the following week or month or whatever the hell it was, and when they were, initially publishing it, because you're like, oh my God, what's going to happen next? That's where a lot of people contend that the Netflix model is not wise, because everybody binges it all at once and then there's nothing else to watch, in comparison with like The Mandalorian and Watchmen. It's like the week of discussion in between and all of just the hype on social media and talking around the water cooler and all of these different things. That's where, this feels very much like The Talisman feels like serialized storytelling to me, in comparison with one big, like, super cohesive effort. And yeah, these guys are probably putting a lot of blow up their nose at this particular point in the early 80s of their career. I mean, it was just a couple years later where King was confronted in an intervention by his family, and they showed him the trash of his office, and it was empty vials of cocaine and half-smoked joints and cigarettes and beer cans and all this other stuff. And they're just like, Steve, we think you may have a problem. And yes, I think this is definitely, I think the clout that both of these guys had at the time was probably what would make an editor fearful of telling them to trim things down just a wee bit. But once again, I still really, really enjoy the hell out of this book. And yeah. So Nick says, the actual Talisman is eerily similar to Black 13, isn't it, though? It's very similar to not just Black 13, but I mean, the description of the power of like the Dark Tower itself, how it's like, once again, as I said, it's the nexus, it's the axle of all possible universes and worlds and all this other stuff. Does any of this book intertwine with Eyes of the Dragon in any way? No, this doesn't intertwine with Eyes of the Dragon, whereas Eyes of the Dragon ties in with the Tower. Obviously, this book, I mean, all of the Dark Tower tie-ins with this are really only made apparent in later Dark Tower books. So, but no, it doesn't tie in with like The Stand or Eyes of the Dragon or anything of that nature. Daniel says, I really like the section where Jack is fighting one of the knights on the staircase and they keep flipping back and forth between worlds as they battle. Yeah, that part is cool. It's like this like suit of armor that like comes alive. And I mean, Jack definitely masters the art of flipping by the time he gets to the Black Hotel, because in the midst of his fighting with Sloat and earlier with this like suit of armor and all that different stuff, he's like jumping back and forth and back and forth. He's on the beach. He's in that. I mean, it's kind of crazy, actually, I gotta say. Angela Hardwick, that's not a name that I've seen on here before. Hi, just read this past year, liked it for the most part, liked Black House just a little bit better. Once again, I still haven't revisited Black House since my original reading of it, and I almost feel compelled to at this particular point. I'm going to announce the book of the month for here in January at the end of this episode. It's not Black House, though, unfortunately, but just rereading this definitely did make me want to check that book out and give it, because oh boy, her name is eluding me. She was on a Dark Tower panel with me. A friend of mine who moved up to Portland. She was on my Dark Tower movie panel a few years ago, and she swore by Black House. I don't know if she tunes into this program anymore, so she will be totally pissed if I don't, if I do not mention her by name. Sarah, that's right. Yeah, Sarah was, she was, as far as Feller, like CRs and Tower Junkies and stuff that I've spoken with, she swears by Black House. She loves that book, and the fact that it's disturbing with the child stuff and everything, and just seeing a damaged Jack at an older age and stuff like that. She constantly contended how compelling it is. Austin says, just finished this and Black House. Black House was amazing. Excited to see if they continue this, and excited for If It Bleeds. Cheers. Yes, here, sir. I think you can definitely tell which parts King wrote. He has very specific phrases that he repeats. Well, yeah, I mean, the whole, as I mentioned earlier, God pounds his nails, and I don't know, though. I'm not sure if they were writing and rewriting, or if they were each writing in individual chapters. I don't think they were writing individual chapters personally, but I mean, it feels more from friends who I've spoken with who have read a lot of Peter Straub. They have all told me this feels like a King book and not a Straub book. If that gives any sort of context or insight to the proceedings here. Okay, moving right along. Fuego Ghost Story is worth a read. The pacing was slow at times, but it had some really cool stuff in it, says Daniel Corey. Yeah, that's one that I am quite curious about. I have a copy of it. It's sitting over there along with all of my other stuff that I have been ignoring for, Joe Hill and for Sai King and Star Wars books, since here in the year of 19, that's pretty much all that I read. Aside from lots of articles, magazines and newspapers and websites and stuff like that. It was all Joe Hill, Stephen King, and lots of Star Wars stuff. But yes, I need to give Barker my proper look. I need to, I picked up a complete collection of all of Lovecraft stuff. And here in 2020, I am adamant about getting around to properly doing Barker at the Moon and Lovecraft You to Death. That's my little typo negative reference there. And I don't know, should I start trying to do like a rotating horror book of some sort here on the channel? I mean, I can read, more than a couple books in a month, I mean, unless I'm reading like goddamn Under the Dome or something like that. But I mean, I can still I'm pretty quick paced with, my turnaround on a lot of this stuff. So would it be cool, not just Stephen King fans here, obviously, but just horror show viewers in general? Would it be cool to have a different rotating book of the month? Would you like, I know Cecil doesn't have a lot of time to read, unfortunately, but I mean, I could see about Marsha, or it could just be me. I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know here in the comments. Yes. Okay, Joshua Dodd says, do you think it's so bloated because they were both writing their own books in a way? No, because it feels very cohesive, but once again, it feels very serialized and episodic, Josh. And the fact that there are these little self-contained adventures, and while they have moderate elements of compelling, I mean, just like how the original Dark Tower was very, I mean, it was released in segments, I mean, there's his palaver with the Man in Black, and then there's the stuff at Tull, and then there's the stuff at the Slow Mutants and all that. Those were serialized, actually. They were separately released and published stories that were all collected together. This does have cohesion. I'm not going to say it doesn't feel cohesive or anything like that, but it's very much like standalone adventures that only loosely tie in with what's coming on a little bit later. Blue says Straub is a very different flavor than any of the Kings. Ghost Story is amazing, but takes patience. He keeps a much more relaxed pace. So says Blue from Cemetery. Ray Kelly says Mr. X by Straub is also a fantastic read. Angela Hardwick says I just watched Tremors 4. That was my other Tremors 4, yeah, going back to the Wild West. I love the Tremors movies, except that last one was real garbage. But 5 was fun, man. I really dug it. Sad that they didn't send that Kevin Bacon show to series. That could have been dope. Sharon says, I love entertainment that allows me to be in pajamas. Oh, well, I'm glad to entertain you in such a relaxed bit of attire. Would it have been better released in serial form like the Green Mile? It's an interesting question. I mean, maybe. I think it could work in such a segment. And that's actually why, as per someone's suggestion earlier, sorry, I'm forgetting the name, but this probably would work better as a television series than it would as a feature. Throw it on one of the streaming services, throw it on HBO or AMC or something like that. I feel like it would be more successful there. Cobra Kai, man, that's a name I haven't seen on here in a hot minute. How the hell are you? Happy New Year as well, yo. Black House definitely has more of a horror vibe. Yeah, it's definitely, this is more fantasy, like fantasy adventure. Black House is definitely far more on the horrific side, especially with like the murder stuff that it deals with and kids and everything. It's tougher at times. I've been here a few times, just very rarely. I've commented on a few of your King videos. Well, thank you, Angela. I appreciate it. I need to read Black House. So many King books to reread, many of them. Okay, so we are almost caught up. And what is our time frame looking like? Well, we have been going for about an hour. So yeah, it is probably closer to wrapping the scenes up at this particular point. So I guess if y'all have any additional thoughts here, since we're at about the 1 hour mark, about this book that you would like, as far as specific, passages, portions, insight, anything of that nature, or if you just have any last minute questions before I wrap all of this stuff up, since it is it's after 8 o'clock Pacific time at this particular point. And once again, everybody, thanks for, tuning in a little bit later, despite the fact that I had some family stuff going on. And yes, greatly appreciated to have all of you here. Sharon says, I need to read Black House again. So many rebooks. Okay, we got that part. Reading Black House will definitely have a side eyeing the old folks at the nursing home afterwards. Cobra Kai says, what's up, Fuego? Have you seen Daniel Radcliffe's film Gun Akimbo that had its premiere months ago, but then went radio silent? I think it went on a few like festivals and stuff, but I know it has not been released wide, and I think Aubrey Plaza's in that as well. And I love Aubrey Plaza. She's great. She plays a bitch in such an amusing fashion. She cracks me up. Non-King books would be great too, says SK. Malito says, I don't mind being all about King. Okay. Mikey says, love Lovecraft, but it does get tedious with the old-timey phrasings and mannerisms, so it can feel like a chore at times. And yeah, Mikey, that's the one thing that a lot of my friends who have read shitloads of Lovecraft contend. They're like, his ideas are really, really good, but the prose doesn't always like hit it in proper fashion. Daniel says, would love a rotating horror author segment, even if it's only once every few months. Okay. Blue says, good talk, Fuego. Get Jacob Tremblay for young Jack. Yeah, that could be very interesting. Great palaver, says Nick. Thanks so very much, man. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess that's about the extent of it, everybody. There was one particular point in this book that prose-wise I liked enough that, aside from there's a description of the Black Hotel at one particular point where they're like describing it as like this drugged out Disneyland or something, which I found very, very amusing. But there is one particular point, it's still in the early like part of the book, but it's where our dueling authors give a very just great indication of the loneliness that Jack is feeling. And it's one of the parts that just, as far as getting across like very authentic human emotion, that I just really enjoyed the hell out of. And so this is where Jack is just flipped back and he just realizes how alone he is. And it just really gets the point across of just that lonesomeness and whatnot. But okay, here it is. Loneliness raged through him. His realization of his outcast status was now complete. Jack began to cry. He did not weep hysterically or shriek as people do when they masquerade with tears. He cried in the steady sobs of one who has discovered just how alone he is and is apt to remain for a long time yet. He cried because all safety and reason seemed to have departed from the world. Loneliness was here, a reality. But in this situation, insanity was also too much of a possibility. Jack fell asleep before the sobs had entirely run their course. He slept curled around his pack, naked except for the clean underpants and socks. The tears had cut clean courses down his dirty cheeks, and he held his toothbrush loosely in one hand. That's how chapter 7 ends, as he is just about to go through the Oatley Tunnel and, become the like indentured servant slave or or whatever. But yeah, I felt like that passage especially, and that is one thing I will definitely say you can tell in some of the use of punctuation when Straub is behind the driver's seat, I guess you can say, because he like does fragmented sentences with semicolons and stuff like that a lot more than King typically does. And as I was reading that part just now, I was just like, this feels a little different than King, obviously, but it's still very well phrased, and it shows just the daunting aspect of this 12-year-old being on this immense journey and just the amount of responsibility on his shoulders. I feel like that couple paragraphs right there just really gets across just the magnitude of everything that this kid has ahead of him and that he is trying to accomplish. And so I really, really like The Talisman. I think it's a terrific book. I hate to say it, I'd love it a little bit less after this reading, but I mean, it's still a hell of an adventure. And if you have never gone on this particular journey before, it is definitely recommended. So I have been Jaime and Fuego, and y'all can find moi on all social media sectors like Twitter and Instagram, Facebook, here on YouTube, where besides the stuff I do on the horror show, I have my own personal YouTube channel. I neglected it for over a year, about a year and a half, as just efforts that the horror show became more frequent, and we saw our numbers rising, especially in 2017 when everything was blowing up with the original It film and the whole King Assance was commencing. I decided to just pretty much put all my eggs in one basket, and I stopped doing content on my own personal YouTube channel. In the year of 19, I decided to change that. I returned to my channel, and I did dozens of videos over the course of the last year, and I don't even have 1,000 subscribers on there, but I've got like 9 and some change. And whereas we have almost 31,000 here on the horror show. If you have the opportunity, please jump over and subscribe and help me get over 1,000 on there. That would be supremely appreciated. And it's me covering stuff that's non-spooktacular, obviously. But if you like comedy and science fiction, comic book movies, Star Wars, obviously, because I did a ton of Star Wars coverage, as I said on there. That is the destination to find all of that stuff. But you're obviously here for scarific stuff. And if you have not liked and subscribed and done all that stuff here on the horror show, we still, at least for the time being, are doing at least an episode a day as Cecil gets more entrenched in pre-production for Dylan's new Nightmare. That may be dipping, but Hail is not going anywhere. Obviously, you will still get your weekly worship, as I call it, every Saturday as we approach the 200th episode of this show. And I obviously wouldn't be, here still without all of you and without Sai King, obviously. But it has been humbling and honoring and really cool and encouraging just to see the sort of positivity that this program brings people. And it's a pleasure. It really, really is. I'm happy just to be, engaging in this palaver with all of you. It really, really does mean a lot. If you want further palaver, beyond just these weekly videos, there is the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group. Hail to Stephen King Facebook group. It's really the only thing that gets me all in the face beesies, aside from moderating Chiron, my band, and the Infotainment page, and some stuff here and there with the horror show. But yeah, it's called Hail to Stephen King, just like the program here. I am the sole admin and moderator over there. We have a Friday segment where we basically do Freak Out Fridays. And if you want to talk about something besides the King clan, that is where you have your opportunity. But the rest of the week, it's all King and Joe and, a little bit of Owen and Tabby here and there, so to speak, and anything related to all of them. It's a ton of fun, and it is a great Ka-Tet of people over there. So, and then lastly, every Monday evening, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific on the Williscredia YouTube channel. It is an awesome experience to get to discuss box office numbers from the previous weekend and make predictions to the upcoming one with CP and Lindsay, Mimsy, as I so affectionately call him, from the My 2 Cents of Nonsense. That's Lindsay's YouTube channel. And then obviously Williscredia. Yep, that's right. Show business. It's a live show that I do every single Monday evening. And I guess now the cat has to come out of the bag, everybody. There were a lot of proponents for this particular book. And this book also celebrated a golden anniversary in November of last year. Are you up for it? Are you up for the daunting task of Under the Dome? Who's down? Who's down for the dome? Yeah, this is a big ass book, and upon my first reading, I didn't love it. But yes, our January book of the month. Since everybody was disappointed, Under the Dome. I'm also going to be doing a review of the second season of Under the Dome because, yes, as all of you may remember, about a year ago, I reviewed season 1, and I think it's finally time to, for its anniversary, review the second season. But even on top of that, here in January, since there is no golden anniversary for us to just engage in palaver about, yeah, I'm going to give my second shot at Under the Dome because the first time I read it, I was honestly not the biggest fan, although I did really like Barbie. I thought he was a compelling protagonist. I did enjoy him thoroughly. But yeah, beyond that, that is about the Dilla. So yes, I guess that is going to be the end of the proceedings. I'm just going to give one last little look over here. Jack sounds like me. Malito says, peace, Fuego. Subscribe to your channel. Oh, it is much, much, much appreciated, Daniel. Grassroots campaign pays off. I got similar feelings as yours towards Under the Dome, Fuego. Well, I am going to get back Under the Dome here in the next month. And if all of you who have any inclination to accompany me, it would be greatly appreciated. So I guess that's going to be the end of the proceedings live here today on The Horror Show, everybody. Gracias, danko, arigata, merci. Thank you so very much. Say thank you. And until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, sin amigos, and constant readers and viewers alike. But I'm hopeful that we get to engage in more of this palaver sooner rather than later. And until that instance occurs, remember, stay scared and read Stephen King. This guy. Yeah. You can pick your friends and you can pick your nose, but you can't pick your king's nose. I'm just goofing. Much love, everybody. Thank you. Check out this shirt, too, by the way. Isn't that dope?